Everyone hear me? Test, test. Okay, you got me now. All right, awesome. We'll get this started here. It's about 16 seconds past 4:30 here. I know that I'm probably, and it wasn't not done strategically, but this is the last meeting I think before you guys can go hit the bar afterwards and get some good fellowship. So it wasn't done strategically here. But before we start here, I want to just for those of you who don't know, my amazing staff here, want to go through and introduce all of them here. I truly tell you, they have the answers before I even ask them, and even they'll give me an answer that I get later asked by an admiral, and they make me look really good. So I want to first start down here with Mr. Zig Wilson, for those who don't know. And then our newest addition to the team, Mr. David Goff there. He's coming in. For those who were in the committee of the whole, you saw his impressive resume. We're really lucky to have him there. He's done a lot of work with the Peace Corps for the past, I want to say it's 5 or 10 years at least, right? Somewhere on there. So we're really excited to have him on board our team, and that was I need to at least mention here too, I know a lot of folks in the staff stepped up for that training position, whether it be YN1 Tober or Lieutenant Booth, or we had our whole auxiliarists that were stepping up to that, with Jenny Stack and Commodore Don Zinner too. So as I mentioned before, we're deeply saddened for his loss. He's had over 10 years supporting us within BSX, so truly appreciative of that. But we're very lucky to have Mr. Goff aboard. Okay, next up, YN1 Tober. Many of you know her there, so, and then, yep. I guess what you're trying to tell me is how much claps is how much more how important they're on the team there. So anyways, so now everyone's got to keep laughing or keep clapping. All right, so now Master Chief Park. Oh geez, oh. Look what I started right here now. Okay, now Mr. Steve Keel. And then, of course, Mr. Steve Minatolo, who's been here since 2000. Oh. Then we got Commander Brad Winans. And don't worry, you have 2 aviators, or actually I should say for all the aviators out there, you have 2 aviators at the helm of a recreational boating safety auxiliary program, so go figure. All right, and then our final, I'm sorry, as I'm looking down there, so Lieutenant Chris Booth there, so. Thank you, sorry, I'm looking in, I was like, yeah, I knew there was someone else that's, yeah. So with that, I'm just going to, we don't really have anything prepared here for the agenda items, so this is an opportunity for you all to ask me certain questions, free shot on goal, so to speak. And I'm going to do exactly what the Commandant and what Admiral Arguin did the other day. So if you see something coming that I can't answer, it's just going to kind of go to whoever is a subject matter expert that I know that can answer that question. So with that, open the floor to everyone. NACO. Good
afternoon, Captain.
Good afternoon, NACO.
I can remember when I was a brand new Chief of Staff and I attended my first NTRAIN, I kept hearing the acronym of the initials, BSX, but I didn't know what that stood for. Would you enlighten our new Chief of Staff?
Yes, it's the Boating Safety and Auxiliary there. So that's what it stands for, Office of Boating Safety and Auxiliary. So thank you. You just love giving me a softball, don't you? Getting warmed up. Okay, gotcha. Didn't know it was being live streamed, so. Yeah, got to change a couple things. No, I'm just kidding.
All right, no questions. Thanks for coming.
There's got to be something out there.
With a lot of other government agencies and their excess inventory, specifically with small boats, Is there any potential for us to kind of get pushed towards the front of the line? I know legally there's probably some pushback on that, but to get some facilities, whereas especially I can speak for D1 North, the facility numbers have dwindled significantly since 2014 to where initially we had over 130 and now we have probably in the neighborhood of 80, and that's maybe a high number. Is there any possibility we can get some excess government property in the name of facilities pushed down towards the auxiliary to supplement?
Well, thank you. That's a great question. I know that's come up quite a bit since I took on the office of, hey, how can we get facilities? Because I know that there were some that were back, late. It was mid-2000s, I want to say. Some of the, it was like a Boston Whaler type facilities that were being kind of offloaded. So there's a couple things. There's two kind of, it can be done, and I think we talked about it last year on it. However, one of the big things is maintenance cost. So the maintenance cost of upkeeping it, so if we're able to do that, are you able to continue the maintenance and the cost of that? And from what I've heard, a lot of folks, when it finally gets to that stage in the game of the acquisition, they look at the facility and they decide, and the decision's made now, we don't have the funds to operate that cost. Now, there is a way to do that. However, per federal regulations, for disposal, you have to go through a certain process. So what I recommend, if you see any, and this is where, if you see any, and this is where like the auxiliary and the active duty, the more that we're a partner together, where we know that, hey, this facility is going to potentially be DRMO'd or given off the foreign military sales or however that process is. If you know the property, whoever the property custodian, property officer is, up front and early and know about the time and can start coordinating those out, that gives you the best, best chance of getting that facility. But in doing that, I would highly recommend looking at all the maintenance costs, because I know when those things have come up, and I want to say, I forget where I was at. They showed me a facility, and the amount of money that they had to put into that facility was probably more than what the boat is actually worth there. So, and now, so I kind of grazed over that. Is there anyone else on the staff that I missed something or said something? Because please, I misspeak all the time, so.
Okay, working? Okay. Yeah, as the captain mentioned, there's a process. I think everybody knows that in general. When it comes to excess property, it's kind of a two-phase process. When the Coast Guard or any federal agency declares some piece of material other than real property, and there are a lot of definitions that go into this, real property being structures, building, land, that kind of a thing. Everything else falls under a category called personal property. Boats, computers, stuff like that. When the Coast Guard declares a boat, a piece of personal property, excess to it, it's basically saying, I'm done with it, but there's still some utility to it. And if there's that utility to it, it's declared excess, and it becomes subject to the availability to basically 6 different entities. All other federal agencies, the U.S. Senate, the U.S. House of Representatives, the architect of the Capitol in Washington, D.C., the government of the District of Columbia, and then a mixed bag of mixed ownership corporations such as the FDIC, the Resolution Trust Corporation, NCUA. Those 6 entities get first dibs on federal excess property. Okay. They get a 21-day window for dibs. Now, it might not seem like a lot to you, but all of these entities have people who are hired to do nothing but monitor regulations, laws, and property availability. So if the Coast Guard declares the boat excess, goes through that, none of these entities pick it up in a 21-day window, it then becomes what's called surplus property. I don't have the exact time frame that it can exist as surplus property, but once it's in that state, it then becomes available to another host of entities. And the Coast Guard Auxiliary is not part of any of them. Those other entities are all other state, local, county governments, government agencies, a host of nonprofit educational and public health entities like hospitals, colleges, museums, nonprofit, I got to read my own notes here, nonprofit, profit and public programs for the elderly, like senior centers, adult daycare centers, public airports are eligible to bid on this surplus property. Educational activities of a special interest to the armed forces. And that's where some of you have heard, oh, the Boy Scouts, oh, the USO. That's right, they're on that list. The Red Cross, the Naval Sea Cadet Corps, the USO, Little League Baseball, Big Brothers and Big Sisters. They all have, and I see, so, stand by, folks. When you start talking about this stuff, you have to check your sense of reality out for a second. And I'm also going to, let me address something at the end of it. Veteran service organizations, too. They're all available. They get first dibs at that surplus property state, okay? And if it sails through that and nobody has picked it up, then the property becomes available for public auction. And in effect, the auxiliary could then go bid on it at that point. Now, if you want to change any of that, you don't like it, and you want to change it, it literally will take an act of Congress. And unlike Jack Nicholson, I'm going to tell you, I think you can handle the truth. The fact of the matter is, that's not going to change. And like I said, check reality at the door for a second. Because as I was going through this, I kind of had to step back for a second and say, do you really think some organization is going to step in, like the auxiliary, and not run into a legislative or congressional hurdle of some sort, or one in the administration that says, wait a minute, now you're coming in out of nowhere, coming out of left field, and you're telling me you want to take away opportunities from the USO, from Big Brothers and Big Sisters, from local governments? Really? That makes it an incredibly hard political sell. And that's just the way it is. And I can go into further history about this, and I'll mention the last time our office broached this in earnest with the Coast Guard Office of Legislation. One of my classmates who will, at the Coast Guard Academy, who will remain nameless, was the chief of that office at the time. And he ended up basically throwing me out of the office and saying, Steve, don't come back on this. This whole process is run by the administration's General Services Administration, GSA. The Coast Guard has gone to that well many, many times to broach this, and we have been told soundly, don't, it's not going to change. So that's the process. That's where we are when it comes to excess property. Like I said, you may not like it, but that's the way it is. In the course of my research for prep for this kind of a question here, I also came across, though, one last thing that we do need to check. Like I said, there are nonprofit organizations that are in the fray for the availability of surplus property. Well, the Coast Guard Auxiliary is not, again, I hope not contrary to popular belief here, the auxiliary is not a nonprofit organization, right? It's not a 501c3. But you do have one. It's the Association Incorporated, right? And that's something Commodore, I talked to Commodore Pica a little earlier just to give him a heads up. But that's something I think that needs to be explored, is whether or not the association can approach the agencies that coordinate this process at the surplus property level. Let the association approach them, and just to see, explain to them who they are, what the auxiliary association is, and see if they might be able to garner some recognition. But otherwise, what I just described is the process. It is not going to legislatively change. I mean, we can try again, but I think that's, it's an insurmountable hill kind of a thing when it comes to this sort of a thing.
Thank you, Steve. I know you. Oh.
I got a question real quick right here on the same topic. 1 second.
Yeah.
So just as a follow-up, in order for us to do our jobs in surface ops, we are assigned PPE to allow us to do our jobs more effectively, obviously, and more safely. What if we aren't asking to purchase, but to be assigned one of these boats? And we do know there's a couple places where we are using Coast Guard assets and the patrols are being manned by auxiliaries. We have areas of our nation where there is no Coast Guard presence, and there's no Coast Guard boats, but yet we still need to help protect our boating public. Is that at all a possibility? Something perhaps you can look into?
Let me just say, you know, the Coast Guard has an allowance list of boats, right? It's got its standard, non-standard boats. It's got an allowance list. And the reason those boats are on that list is because there's funding associated with each hull. When the Coast Guard declares one of those boats excess and basically says, I don't need it anymore, it wants to divest itself of that boat permanently because it may be able to use the money, shift the money to another asset, or give it up in savings budgetarily, kind of thing. But the bottom line is when the Coast Guard says one of its boats is excess, it wants it gone. It's not going to it's not going to maintain ownership and transfer the custody of it to somebody else because there's dollars involved directly linked to it. There have been cases, you know, the Coast Guard can transfer, 1149 form, transfer property to the auxiliary for auxiliary usage, but it's still Coast Guard property. When a Coast Guard wants to get rid of a boat and is declaring it excess, it wants to get it off the books totally. It can't transfer it. If it's saying it's excess, it's accessing it and it's got to throw it to the process. It can't transfer it to somebody.
So, Comrade, I think I know. So that's so for like a boat that maybe the Coast Guard is going to continue to use and continue in as far as augmenting our current like boat station and so forth. So that's definitely something we can look into. I know I asked a question when there was boat crews that are qualified at different, I think, where was it, station, I want to say it's station, not St. Pete, San Key, because they've got watch standards that go out on the, but at what point, I think, and I'm probably gonna, I don't want to put Master Chief on the spot there, but it's probably usually up to the OIC, I think, as far as the qualification, if you could, but then that would be an all, that's something we can definitely look into. I don't want to overspeak anything here and we can look at that with the staff there. So,
and Captain, I want to say it was the folks in 8 Western a long time ago with the Coast Guard owned auxiliary operated vessel kind of program. D14 was in there. I'd swear there's somebody in D8. That was going on post 9/11, where the Coast Guard, it was a Coast Guard owned boat, and the auxiliary operated it. The Coast Guard, it was Coast Guard owned because the Coast Guard kept it on its allowance list and kept the funding with it. Yeah. But it didn't have the crew in the place and was willing to give up that asset for operations in a specific area where it could be manned by an auxiliary crew. Not today, evidently, right now. That was good maybe 15 years ago, but you know, right now, I don't think there are any of those. Are there?
Yes.
You still have them? Okay. Okay.
The air station uses to conduct voice training, and I think Elizabeth City does as well.
Okay. All right. Right.
And we had one also that actually was taken from us. We had it crewed, everything was good, and they needed it for somewhere else, and then it just went by, and we never saw it again. So.
The Coast Guard and the boat, I'm saying boat forces, are making a conscious decision to retain the hull of that boat on the allowance list, maintaining the dollars with it, but it's saying I don't have the crew, and auxiliary, you folks crew it for me, kind of a thing. But if the Coast Guard doesn't want to do that, It's going to declare the whole excess, and it's going to divest itself, and into that process it goes.
Yeah, I think that's right. Come to what you're asking for is, can we just 1149 a piece, like a piece of gear? That's what they did. They 1149 a facility or a Coast Guard asset that was no longer needed by the Coast Guard. But 731 says, yes, we'll allow the Coast Guard to assume this property, we'll 1149 to you. You can still use a portion of AFC 30 funds to maintain the gear on it. And we're just not going to receive money on it on our end, so they 1149 it. But you have to get buy-in from 731. Now, whoever was in charge of 731, the captain at that time, which would have been the Office of Boat Forces and whatever it was in those days when before it transferred to 731, that's that captain's decision, and if they're willing to do that. So and that's a decision that's got to go through Coast Guard leadership up the chain of command from the sector to the district up to 731. And if they buy off on it with an old asset they're willing to keep, then there's a possibility for that to happen. But if it goes to, you lost it because it went to excess property and they said no more, we don't want it, there's a funding issue, we're getting rid of it. We're clearing house, so that's the reason why you lost it.
Captain, that's louder than I thought it was going to be. As a follow-up to that, is BSX or should BSX be doing any further looking into the situation with facility numbers continuing to fall, the active duty numbers being way down, as we heard yesterday and saying for the past year? The auxiliary is going to be asked to do more and more and more, yet our facilities are being reduced, and just in part due to the numbers of the auxiliaries that we have, and they're not being willing to offer their facilities. Is or should BSX be looking at supplementing some sort of facilities? And I know it's a property issue, but maybe some brainstorming to, because if we don't, in 15 years, we're not going to have maybe enough facilities to do much augmenting the active duty. So,
Right now, it's not high on our priority list. That from what is it not even on our?
That's not something. So that's something that our office could. That's something that our office could collaborate with, again, boat forces, but because we don't control any assets. Like BSX is strictly the policy writers, right? We write policy. We don't have anything to do with decisions made on facilities of ownership or anything like that. Like, the districts don't work for us either, right? And that's how every program is designed at headquarters. For air stations, as an example, those operational air stations do not work for the Office of Aviation Forces at headquarters. Nothing to do with that. The Office of Aviation Forces oversees the operational policy, but they don't decide what anybody does with their assets. They don't purchase assets. They don't do anything like that. That all goes through different entities, which is like the acquisitions director at CG9. So again, we can be involved in those conversations, and we can certainly be an advocate to say, hey, we endorse you guys paying for and supplying this. We could do that, but that's really the extent of our involvement in those decisions. So kind of yes, but it's not us.
I think, though, along those lines, though, if there's a need, because right now there's nothing within the acquisitions I know of anything that's due for it. But if there's a need from the operational commander, that's usually where then we see there's a need. Okay, then we can look to see and work with acquisitions. But there would have to be a whole BSX, I think, acquisition piece, and we don't have that right now.
Okay, thank you. We touched on the practical realities of diminishing facilities, diminishing coxswains, diminishing QEs, diminishing boat crew in the auxiliary, and it's pretty broad in terms of the impact on the auxiliary. So it's more of a not really a question, but when you look at the obstacles, the ones I've discovered are NAV A and B seems to be a serious obstacle. We looked at possibly doing that at our NTRAIN, and we couldn't find a qualified instructor to do it. when you look at some of the other criteria that's just come out in terms of boat crew and coxswains having some additional duties, none of those seem like a stretch. They seem very appropriate. But my concern is this. When you look at the required training to become a QE or a coxswain, I think we're going to continue to see this negative impact on the availability of people willing to go through those steps, go through all of the steps required to become crew or coxswain or a QE. And I'm wondering if there isn't something we can assess to determine if the path to those positions might somehow be assessed as to whether or not is NAV A and B really required, things like that. In D7, we have another issue. Earlier on, we had a pretty serious critical weather incident. Many of our coxswains, up until very recently, couldn't even get out on the water because of the conditions in the water. A lot of obstacles, a lot of wood, a lot of debris. There's still a lag phase. I'm kind of hitting you with a couple of things, and I'm not looking for answers today, but I'm simply laying out the reality of the auxiliary from my perspective. Several folks have not been able to get the mandatory hours because of a lack of facilities. It's very challenging to get a QE in an AOR that covers Puerto Rico to South Carolina to get adequate people, adequate boats, adequate qualified people. So one of the things we're really running into is I think people want to become crew. I think they want to become coxswains. But we've reached a critical mass in terms of making that opportunity really available to them for a number of things. So maybe we should consider, based on where we really are. We did an extension, we did it for 2 years, and it was appreciated by everybody. Perhaps that may be something we need to look at again. I've given you 4 or 5 things in a row here, but I think there's obstacles to getting to those you know, things that people would like to do because of those reasons.
So I kind of get the gist, I think, of I know you threw about 3 or 4 things, like you said, but that pretty much boils down to getting more like right now the qualified coxswains and QE that we have are going down, and how do we keep them so folks don't become unqualified, and the fact that there's been COVID. I know we had the restrictions that moved on, so how do we make sure so that we don't have this large workforce that's continued to just go unqualified? So I know the one big thing with and I'm going to let Master Chief speak. I know he can definitely speak, you know, give more the true facts there and speak a lot more elegantly than I can. But there is one thing I will not jeopardize is safety. You all know that what happened with the Hillsborough Inlet. So there's a lot of things that were added on there. And when at the end of the day, I would rather have left coxswains out there than losing a coxswain on the water because of not having a standard. So I know it's a hard decision to make, and that's, I know I answered that in I think the ASOC class had that exact question for me regarding that. And so if it's, when it comes to safety, just I know that's kind of bred into the aviation culture, and I feel it's the same thing for any operation that we do in the Coast Guard. So with that said, Master Chief, I know you said you had some things to add to that.
So let's look at it from a perspective of history. We think we're going down, but if you drew a straight line using a wave and drew a straight line, we're really not. If you look at it, look at pre-11, 9/11. The numbers of the auxiliary wasn't high, but because of a tragedy and voluntarism in this country after 9/11, the number skyrocketed, just like it did in the Coast Guard. It went to 40-something thousand in 2000. In 2004, there was like 44,000 auxiliaries. Now we're down to just below 21,000 in that ballpark, give or take. So we're really down by maybe 6,000 in all reality if you look at what happened to that. So something tragic was to happen in this country again, and we were attacked and volunteers went up, the numbers would skyrocket again. You'd get people that would want to be volunteering and doing it based on a patriotism type of thing. So you're going to get that wave. It's going to get to a flat line. It's going to flat line out. It's not just going to keep going down where we just completely lose the auxiliary. That's never going to happen. So, right. Right. So,
wants to jeopardize safety. We live by that same mantra. We would never do that.
so Nav A and Nav B is not mandatory, though, to become a crew member?
A QE.
A QE, okay, so
We have a problem with QEs. Active.
how many active duty QEs does District 7 have?
We have several, but at the same time, and I thought that might come up, we recognize the lack of adequate forces you currently have to your own obligations. So we run into this as well, where a small boat station would like us to perhaps do something in Canaveral, but their qualified people are. They have their own limitations right now based on everything we all know. You're having a challenge with recruiting, well, so are we. So the reliability of a Coast Guard QE or someone to help us with a QE has diminished greatly. They're just not that available. 4 or 5 years ago, that was not an issue, but it is an issue today.
And we are pushing that issue during, I do the Boat Forces Command Cadre course and represent for the auxiliary, which is all your COs, OICs that are going to Boat Forces units. They must go through this course. We talk about it. We are pushing the issue to say you need to get QEs that are active duty QEs. I know, there are a lot of officers that want active duty QEs to do the job because there's a little bit different of a standard. It could be a little tougher. They don't run with us all the time, but if there are ways to decrease the way that's going to work with QEs is by getting more active duty involved in the QE program and getting those individuals to help offset. The number one priority should be your auxiliaries doing the QE mission. But we have the alternative to look over and say, hey, I need a QE at this unit. I need a QE. And if your sectors, if the directors are working with the sectors and the sector commander is on board with each unit in his or her sector having a QE at the station, I promise you the COs and OICs of those units will have QEs available because it's being driven by that sector commander. But they probably don't know, so it would be more of an educational thing. Let's try to get more to offset that and to make it a better program. Because we do work hand in hand, we are performing the same mission, so why are the QEs, not helping out with that and getting an active duty and provide that cross training to help out to make the whole organization better.
When they are available, they're very helpful.
Yes.
One thing to just add with that issue too, if you know for the National Board, one of the recommendations, there's one where it discusses specifically the active duty when going to auxiliary, taking that so it can be a quick streamline. So we're aware of that. We'll continue to look at that problem, but whatever we can, because then hopefully that would be a great avenue where not only recruitment there, but you got someone that's already QE qualified. So hopefully that's going to help produce some of those more QEs that are auxiliaries. Thank you, though. Great question.
Captain, I've just got one question in 37 parts. I'm just teasing. My name is Todd Monis. I am the ANACO for ForceCom. We're the folks that do a lot of your augmentation with your CA and your clergy, health services. We do member training and public affairs through the interviews with the commandant and so forth and so on. We would not be able to do our job without you, and I just want you to know that we thank you all for everything that you do that so often go without praise in order to help us accomplish our mission. And I know it's a tough thing because you're doing RBS plus the auxiliary and that kind of stuff, but I just want y'all to know that we really do appreciate everything that you do. Even though we get frustrated sometimes, you like the facility questions and QE questions and so forth, we know that you're doing the very best that you can, and we do appreciate it. We appreciate everything that you do for us. We're here for you. My team especially, you call, just like the NACO said, you call, our team will be there for you. We appreciate you.
Well, thank you very much for those kind words, and no, I did not pay him to say that right there. So, but like I said at the beginning of this, I introduced my staff. They're the ones that deserve the praise here. They're the ones that get stuff done without myself even knowing it. So they're them. But thank you all too for your volunteerism. It's almost like a thank you right back at you. So.
Captain, my name is Tim Derry. I'm District Chief of Staff from 9th Western. And I hate to go back to the boat issue, but I did want to ask a question just for my information's sake.
Yeah.
You mentioned that boats have been given into the custody of the auxiliary then returned for lack of maintaining. And when you talk about these boats that are ready to be cycled out of the Coast Guard fleet, I was involved with a group, and we acquired, I didn't acquire, but I was involved in it, and we upfitted 3 25s over the past, I don't know, 5-6 years, and used them effectively, and actually one still exists, but it's no longer a facility. But my question, when you say that the maintenance, because we were capable of maintaining them fine, there's a lot of resources out there, but one boat was purchased complete, it was kind of a rough boat. One was, I think, minus the electronics, and one was minus the engines and the electronics. Are these complete boats that were being handed out? Because there's a significant difference between our ability to, quote unquote, maintain them and or build them a new boat from the ground up. The gentleman to your right makes reference to retiring the hull. Is that literally retiring the hull, and engines and electronics get picked off of them?
So the one, I know specifically one facility I saw, and I cannot remember where it was at, which lake it was on. It wasn't in North Carolina, it was another lake, but I saw one of those facility that was, it didn't get purchased or anything, but it was purchased by someone else. But essentially, all the electronics and all the components were taken off because they were sold off. So you essentially had close to, I think they quoted like 150,000 that you would have to put in that to get that thing operational. So there's a lot of hidden cost, and then not only the, and when I say the overall maintenance cost to be prepared for that, I mean, it's an occurring, so is it budgeted for? You know, that's the one thing, because the Coast Guard's, like we said, like Steve was saying, when we're getting it off the books, we're getting it off the books because we're losing money on that asset. It's no longer reliable. We just need to get rid of that thing, so it's more of a burden. It's a burden on us.
So it could conceivably be half a boat still.
I saw, like the one that I saw literally was just a hull.
Yeah, and then we did acquire one that way, and a hull and a trailer, and we put it together, and that was the staggering expense. But the other one, the complete boat, was something that literally we put graphics on and put it on the water and used it for a couple of years. So, so there was a big variance there, and I would say that the capabilities of a number of auxiliaries or group of auxiliaries to maintain a complete boat is significantly different than having to, you know, build one from the ground up. So.
But the expertise is there. I know. I forget, where is it? I think Commodore Molesky brought me over to, where is it? Station Fire Island, where they do the boat inspections beforehand, and they do them just as good, if not better, than the active duty folks. And the active duty folks thoroughly enjoy that because it's almost, they're making their program better. So, is that correct?
Thank you, Captain. Thank you for what you did.
Thank you.
So I'm not going to ask for a boat or anything like that for a little while here, but I will talk about the reimbursement side of it.
Okay.
That's an area, it's hard for auxiliarists. When you look at food and you look at the cost of things, even for us, we can't buy water for our staff, which is a safety issue for us, and we can't be reimbursed for it. That's a struggle. And again, when we talk about motivating our members and saying, you know, we love you, you love us, we're all already talking to each other and things like that, right? At the end of the day, it doesn't translate to that when we actually have to go to and say, look, you have to buy your own water. And when we talk about the maintenance cost or food cost for us to be able to do anything, whether it's on a boat or wherever it is, that's where I think right now maybe there's even more of a rub, or SAMA money. So maybe there's a way that we can even twist the cube a little bit to say, hey, listen, okay, that's fine. We can help get more OPFACs if we can get more SAMA money, for example, or we can get some more reimbursements from some of the other things. So I think that maybe that can be hit from a different avenue also that's going to help the auxiliarist out. So is there any thought, the question is there any conversations had to actually look at that scale and change that scale?
So that, are you referring to like the per diem, for example? When you go on orders, you get a certain per diem. Unfortunately, with that said, I can't change. That's a GTR. That's another, you talk about federal regulations, stuff like that. I can't specifically.
What about SAMA though? Say SAMA.
So funds. SAMA, that is one thing, and we increased that last year. Was it this year? Yeah, no, was it this year, fiscal year 23? Yes, and it's, was it 30?
33% across the board, 35 for aviation, 30 for both forces.
And that was understanding that was, we know that there still is a shortfall in the SAMA. And as you know, SAMA just, if you read through the manual, It says SAMA specifically to help offset the maintenance costs, not all the maintenance costs. So that usually gives us a tough time to figure out how much more we can get that. And I believe, Mash, if you were saying that that's something we're going to look at again to continue to see how much we can raise it, because of course with inflation, I mean it's been through the roof. And believe me, I mean even if you look at the active duty just got our pay raises this past year. If you look at what inflation, it really didn't even keep up with that. So I hear you on that. The SAMA, that's one thing that we can do, and I believe is that kind of what we look for the next. Because I know we already raised it 33%. 33%.
The water I could check on. I know active duty wise, you cannot purchase. Oh, I'm sorry. I know for active duty wise, when I was off charge, you cannot use AFC 30 funds to purchase water unless you got a waiver, and that would have to be for like a hurricane disaster or something like that, where you'd have to purchase it and you'd have to get the amendment that had to go into the package to file for that. So I got to see, can the funds be used to purchase water? Would that be illegal under policy, under the FRAM, to be able to do that? I don't know. You could purchase ice. So could water be one of those things in addition to ice that could be put underneath there to purchase it where it won't be a legal use of funds? I have to see. I don't know. That's actually a good point. If we can get water added into it. Meals are a set rate. When we come out with the new auxiliary operations process guide, there's actually going to be web links in there that will take you so you can actually see the current links. It's going to get you to the right spot. It is not rations in kind. It is not a BAS. That's not what auxiliaries get, because if it was, it'd be $200-something, $400 a month. You get what each pays, so you get $4.65 for dinner and lunch, $2.65 for breakfast. That's a set rate that we have no control over, and that's what it's going to be. But water is a good idea, as long as it can be done legally. It's something we could look at getting in now. This goes into that support fund that each district gets. That would help out, but then you start getting funds check failures, and we see the reality of what happens now with that. So, but it is, $5 can go is a big difference if you're going to buy some water. You could buy a 36 pack or 40 pack from Walmart for under $3. Now it's like $6. So it is a good idea though. Let me look into that.
But if there's other ideas like that that you think, bring it to our office. We'll take a look at. We'll either be able to tell you, yeah, we can't, or no, we can't, and some of the reasons. But a lot of these things are tied, like it said, with JTR and stuff that's all federally regulated. And as Steve says, it takes an act of Congress to change. So, but there might be some things that we might be able to help out. So, great question there.
Captain Dave Larkin from District 17.
Okay.
I'm going to ask you something that possibly your auxiliary staff can't help you with, and ask you to put your other hat on, your RBS hat.
Okay.
Because RBS is a big thing of what we do. I'm just curious if there's anything coming down the RBS side, any initiatives or anything coming that we should know is coming.
No, so we've got the recreational boating safety strategic plan. I signed that out. It's on the BSX II website. I signed that out, was it last month? And all that strategic plan is aligned directly with the Commandant's strategic plan. And actually the Prevention Readiness Initiative, which is essentially all of prevention, it's aligned with that. And then of course above that is the Commandant's strategic vision and so forth. And that strategic plan actually takes it down to actual specifically quantifiable tasks and actions that we are set out to do for the next 5 years. So my staff now, where you're going to utilize that document where, hey, if it's not on the strategic plan, then why are we working on it? And that's going to be, so take a look at that strategic plan. And now that strategic plan is also going to change on it. When I say change on like a yearly basis. So I was able to talk to Admiral Arguin about this, and he gave me the signature delegation there. So I've signed it off. So every year we're going to take a look at it, because as you know, whether it be paddlecraft or the new e-foils, the on the water, things are constantly changing, and we can't just stick to that 5-year plan. We have to be able to pivot and maybe make some augmentation to that. One thing I will say, thanks for all of the auxiliaries that helped my office with the life jacket observation. I'm going to actually put a plug in for that. I know some of my folks from BSX2 asked for that again. I believe it's going to be coming up this summer. There'll be another opportunity to do that. And for those who don't know, that the program is designed so we can look at the behaviors of our recreational boaters that are out there. Hey, are they wearing life jackets? If they are, they wear the inflatable ones. Are their kids wearing life jackets? And just getting a good count for that. So if you're not familiar with that program but are interested, please let me know, and we'll be able to, because I believe it's going to kick off again here this summer. There are a couple things, now that I'm thinking, I'm going to talk the Operation Dry Water. As you know, that kicks off right before the 4th of July weekend, so you'll seeing that. That's where I think the auxiliaries used a lot on that as well, where sometimes we have law enforcement officers that help get on some auxiliary facilities, but more importantly, the partnership with the local sheriff's office and so forth there. At least I've seen it firsthand on Lake Norman with that. And we also have Recreational Boat Safety Week, which is, I believe it's the week right before Memorial Day weekend, which kind of kicks off our RBS. So I just threw a lot at you there.
Good afternoon, Captain. Question for you. Is there any talk about anything with the IDs that we currently have?
The auxiliary, are you talking about the ALACs, or are you talking about the current
auxiliary card, ID card
so
that we currently have?
Auxiliary ID card. What we're trying to do right now with one of our highest priorities within our staff here is linking AuxData II to the printers, and we've already got the authority to operate on the current printer that we've selected. But with that, we've got to look for funding for that, because our goal is to give each DIRAUX office purchase those, but we need to acquire funding first for that, which we are hopefully it's on a backlog thing right now, but that's our plan for that. Now, does that answer your question, or is there more to that? Okay, yeah, please come hit me if there's something else that's specific on that.
Good afternoon, Captain. Sonny Thatch, 9th Western DCO. As more non-traditional, more direct Coast Guard supporting missions come online, such as financial service advisors, legal, you have the question of liability. And we have our current rules, but there's uncertainty as to how expansive they are, if they cover things such as plumbers and electricians, which are positions and needs that I was in recent discussions with our sector commander over. So, is there movement at your office to provide further guidance and clarity as to what our current assignment to duty covers when it comes to, for example, a plumber or an electrician? Does a rated active duty member need to go behind an auxiliary plumber or electrician to certify the work so that it's under the liability of the Coast Guard? Is that really an effective force multiplier if it's duplicative work? So is there further guidance coming along as these additional direct support missions to the Coast Guard comes online?
Well, if they're assigned to duty, they are covered. I think I don't know if there's any more guidance that needs to be, but I'm going to look at some of my experts here to the right and left of me to make sure I'm not misspeaking on that.
So we can at least get clarity, because at that point that's currently being circulated and percolated at 9 district legal. So we could maybe get some clarity at the district and sector levels.
Did you?
Well, I was going to say, if you have a specific example. But as Captain said, if an auxiliarist is assigned to duty and working under orders, they're fully covered as far as liability and whatever they are being asked to do for the Coast Guard.
And remember the 3 elements of an assignment to duty, or what auxiliaries do. There's got to be an assignment to duty. You've got to have it from an order issuing authority, and you got to, most importantly, operate within the scope of employment. Now, there's no move afoot that I'm aware of, on behalf of my captain here, kind of. No, but there's no move afoot for us to start saying or trying to go down the road of before an auxiliarist can do anything like build a console at a watch center for a station kind of thing, which has often happened. Wheelchair ramps kind of a thing. Auxiliary effort has been put towards that. Were they master carpenters that did it? No. Do you know how to wield a hammer? Yeah. Well, define the scope of work, set them to it, and away they went, and that was okay, as long as they didn't start destroying property or go outside a conventional scope of employment. Like I said, there's no move afoot, though, and I don't know what would start prompting us to start being so sensitive to utilizing auxiliaries to do what I'll just describe as common tasks, helping out a unit, build something or install something. I mean, certainly, and it's up to the command authority, too. If they want a new electric panel wired in, and you want an auxiliarist to do it, yeah, you probably want an auxiliarist that's an electrician, a certified electrician. But if you want somebody building a console or something like that, do you need a master carpenter? No. I don't think that's something the Coast Guard wants to start going down and parsing and defining requirements for, again, common tasks as I'm describing right now. So if that's cropping up in D9, I guess we'd be interested in knowing some more about it, but that's probably not something that the Coast Guard in general wants to start doing.
Thanks, Stephen. I think right now we're getting some help from our legal team here.
So, yeah, assigned to duty and acting within the scope of employment, and the third requirement, if there is a qualification, is be qualified. So if there's a qualification involved in the particular activity and that person is not up on their qualifications, they're not going to be covered either.
Awesome. Thank you, Bruce.
Patty Pachowski from 9th Central. A quick question here, and dealing with the boat certs, the certifications and stuff. I do appreciate that coming out, and I know that we're still reading it and really trying to take it in. But the question I have is, is there been any discussions, okay, talking about AuxData II, where this coxswain or this crewman who has a piece of paper in their hand, they have to keep track of their currencies. Is there anything in the works right now where when a coxswain comes in, they put the tasks in so that the poor crewman, not carrying this piece of paper around, hopefully it's going to be in mint condition by the end of the season. Is there something that can be done real time so that this coxswain or crewman can do a report, say, I need to do a man report, or I need to do 2 hours underway at night? Is there some big discussions on that to help the auxiliary keep up with their?
I think Master Chief's going to be able to
He's ready to answer that one.
He's got it right there. So, see what I tell you, amazing. Has the answers before I can even think about that.
So, Jen Austin and Salesforce and the rest of the CAB team for AuxData II, the MT, the training task, and please, Jen, just don't be afraid to speak on this if I say something that's incorrect, because I have to lean on my EA on the AuxData side. Yes, my thought was that, but the MT part in AuxData is a mess. I'll keep it in a polite way. It needs to be fixed. So there is work to get this done. The reason why you're doing the sheet, this is a 1-year trial. So we're doing this sheet here with a roll-up task to see how it works to get us to 24. Now, this could continue till 25. It could go 2 or 3 year process, because it's not something that's going to happen like that. We do want to get the auxiliary just like active duty. You come in, the coxswain self-attest, goes in under the activity and says, we did a man overboard, a tow, and a Victor Sierra. They put it in for their crew, and then that automatically associates to the task, whether it's crew coxswain, just like the active duty. And then if you complete everything, you stay green, you're good to go for the next cycle. That is a lot of data work to make that happen. And that's the problem you run into, is it's going to take a long time to get the system set up like that. So that is our end goal, correct? That we eventually will have it where you do it. But we already have a hard enough time it is right now getting coxswains to put patrol orders in AuxData and do it right. So now we have to teach them to capture task, maintenance task, in addition to everything else that we're having to fight with to get the coxswains to do right in AuxData. So now it's a learning curve again. So then we'll get people to get aggravated saying, I already dislike AuxData II, now I got to do this. So it becomes a cultural thing trying to change, but we do have that concept. We want to get to a point where that could happen. Is it something that's going to happen in 2 years? Probably. It's going to take, that's a long term. It could be 5, 6 years down the road that we would get to that. But we don't know yet how it is, but that is a good idea. We want to simplify the process, but it's not going to be easy getting to that point.
All right. We are about out of time. I think we've got one more question in-house, and then I have one from online. So.
So part of the thought process on that was, you know, to Master Chief's point, you get a lot of like pushback on buy-in on just putting an O1 Delta in. And so to roll this out effectively, to say, okay, now we want you to micromanage all of these tasks, which is, it's all or nothing. You know, it's not that you can get to the end of the year and have, you know, 7 of the 8 done and you've satisfied that requirement. It's that you have to have all of them done to get that the requirement met. And so when we were talking about this, you know, Master Chief was bouncing off of me, okay, the idea of putting all of those tasks in there, and I said, okay, great, but that's going to put a tremendous amount of one-off pressure on trying to get that stuff in the system, in addition to shifting the mindset of you got to do this in the first place. And so kind of the compromise that they were willing to let me propose and come to was, you know, everybody, the task trackers and things like that, I was like, okay, everybody's used to the idea of you have a PQS book, you show up, you know, for boat crew, you're going out and you're saying, okay, who's got their PQS, who needs a task signed off today? So that concept is already in our psyche. That's why there was a very deliberate design process on those task trackers to emulate that concept, where it's you show up with your piece of paper, you know, you write it down. We've got them in fillable form now, so you don't even necessarily have to carry around the piece of paper and lose it. You can just keep the electronic version and fill it in. So we've tried to make it an easier pain point for people to deal with, but at the end of the day, the only thing that gets you across the finish line is if all of those tasks are completed, and that's the single roll-up task that the IS officers have to deal with. You know, so it was trying to capture the spirit of what they wanted to do from the sense of the safety standpoint, like the spirit of why those requirements are there in the first place, but not make it so impossible for, you know, IS officers to have to enter all of these micro tasks, or the coxswains to have to enter all the micro tasks. It's like, let's see if we can do this roll-up concept first and, you know, kick the tires on that and see if it works out. And then, like we said, just give us 2023 to test run it and see if we need to reevaluate in 2024. So there was a very deliberate process to try to capture what was trying to be done, but make it as easy as possible on everybody with the tools that we already have at our disposal. So.
All right. Last question comes from an online viewer. Has there been any discussion on looking at AuxPad and outreach to the paddling community to boost numbers and diversity of mission resources?
That's a great question.
Can you repeat it, please?
I sure can. Has there been discussion on looking at AuxPad and outreach to the paddling community to boost numbers and diversity of mission resources?
Where's Commodore Tiny Center at? Where you at? Yeah, there he is. Can you help with this, please? you developed that program?
The answer is yes. That's what I think BSX knows from the things that I've sent in and requested. We're trying to get district staff officer position accepted where it can reach out to each community. We're coming up with flyers and different stuff that can be done and delivered to the communities and in the paddlecraft communities. And the RBS group is doing a lot of work on it. Matter of fact, there's some training that'll be coming out, not only for people that may want to become an AuxPad operator in the future, but also the seminar is being redone. It should be ready within the next 2 weeks. It's just unfortunate I have to do a 14-day read ahead, and it just got done. So it's nobody's fault. It just is what happened. But the answer is unequivocally yes. I was AuxPad ashore. That's what I'm talking about, is this is AuxPad ashore that all this is going on. The hope, so, and I should add this, the final step is that all the districts at some point will get interested to own the water also. And we'll have to look at that. But the main thing to me is reaching the public and taking care and saving lives. Thank you.
And one thing to add that to is, we had the AuxPad recent, those handbooks. There's 2 of them that are out there that have been signed. A lot of work to Commodore for his team getting all that up, and we've been going back and forth, not only within BSX but at NextCom regarding that, to make sure that we can get out a really good handbook for there. And you'll, like I said in my remarks earlier this morning, the change of watch that we're trying to look, or change of watch, sorry, I get confused with the committee of the whole with the acronyms there. So a lot of instructions that we have out there that we're trying to make into process guides, SOPs, manuals, that are all then just signed by the office chief at BSX, so we can change with our times quicker than maybe a commandant instruction would be. So.
All right. Thank you guys for the questions that you asked and the online viewers asked. Thank you for all the answers and information you gave us.
Thank you all, and thank you for all that you do.
If you moved the table tents, switched them around, turned them down, whatever, put them where you found them.
you.